"You're not on the list, ma'am." He says it like he's done this 100 times today. His clipboard barely twitches in his hand as he squints at the roster, then at me. I don't flinch. "Check under heart." He hums. Not rude, not warm, just going through the motions. "I've got a Matthew Rowan, Lieutenant Colonel. Maggie Rowan, spouse of honoree. No Camille Rowan." "That's me, Camille Rowan, 38, Brigadier General, Defense Intelligence, 20 years in, 10 years out of sight. Not even a footnote in the family program." I lean slightly closer, just enough to let the coat shift and show the outline of my uniform underneath. He notices, but says nothing. I could flash my credentials, pull rank, create a minor base-level incident that would have every officer within 50 yards scrambling for context. But I don't. That's not why I'm here. Instead, I just smile. "It's okay. I'll wait." The guard hesitates, uncertain whether to insist I leave or to ask who I really am. But he does neither. He steps back and lets me stand near the gate like a distant relative hoping for leftovers. It's cold. The kind of ceremonial cold that cuts through wool, not because the air is bitter but because the context is. I watch as guests trickle in. Retired officers, reporters, high-ranking brass, each greeted, scanned, welcomed. A poster flaps slightly in the wind. "Honoring General Richard Rowan, 41 years of exemplary service." That's my father, the hero, the man of the hour. I see him before he sees me. He's standing just beyond the ropes, talking to 2 senators and a major from Fort Bragg. Still tall, still sharp, still the man who thinks discipline tastes like black coffee and ambition. Beside him, my mother is in heels too high for her age and pearls too deliberate for a military ceremony. She's smiling like she choreographed this whole day. Maybe she did. My brother walks up behind them, flanked by his wife and their 2 overly polite kids. Matthew's uniform is spotless, of course. His medals shimmer like Hollywood props. He looks like the kind of man Dad would salute in public and scold in private. They breeze past me like I'm part of the architecture. Matthew spares me a glance. "Problem with your clearance, Ev?" Smirk. No pause. Not even a hello. I stand there, still, like I've trained to, hands behind my back. Chin up. The corporal at the gate glances nervously. I can call someone general." I shake my head. No need. Because I already know what's going to happen next. 3 months ago, I was working from a secure compound off the coast of Djibouti. No windows, no mail, just operations and silence. I got a call. Secure line. Code level clearance. The voice on the other end belonged to the Deputy Secretary of Defense. "L, we're declassifying Operation Daggerlight. You're getting the Medal of Valor." I said nothing. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I didn't know what to feel. "And we're awarding it at your father's ceremony. Full audience. Full press." There was a pause. Then he added, "It's time they saw you." The gate corporal straightens suddenly. His earpiece twitches. His hand flies to his brow in a fast salute. A black sedan pulls up behind us, windows tinted, the kind of car that means someone more important than protocol is arriving. Out steps General Elias, Supreme Allied Command. He doesn't make eye contact with anyone, not until he looks at me. "General Hart," he says. They're waiting. And just like that, the clipboard doesn't matter. The ropes don't matter. The silence doesn't matter. I walk past the corporal without another word. As I step inside the building, I feel the warmth hit me, not from the air but from the friction of being seen after a decade of being invisible. If you've ever shown up to a room where no one thought you belonged, if you've ever stood in uniform while your own family squinted at you like a stranger, then take a moment, subscribe to this channel, drop your location and your local time in the comments, and tell me, have you ever been the quiet one they never expected to rise? Now, Let's listen to my story journey. I used to think silence was the safest way to survive my family. That if I just kept my head down, did the work, showed up when necessary, and didn't correct anyone when they got it wrong, I'd at least avoid the bruises. Not physical ones, emotional. The kind that don't leave marks but leave gaps. Growing up, heart meant knowing how to salute before you knew how to ride a bike. My father, Richard Rowan, lived and breathed the military. He didn't just serve, he became the uniform. Everything in our home was rank, schedule, order. Even breakfast had a chain of command. If you poured cereal before Dad had his coffee, it was insubordination. He never yelled. That would have made him too human. Instead, he disapproved in silence, letting you suffocate under the weight of his wordless disappointment. My mother was a different kind of general. Her battlefield was image, and her weapons were grace and guilt. Her smile was always camera-ready, her criticisms delivered like compliments. "You look so serious, Camille. Try to soften your expression." Translation: don't make people uncomfortable with your ambition. I learned quickly that daughters in our family were expected to support, not serve. My brother Matthew? He was the heir apparent. If Dad was a statue, Matthew was the marble chip off the old block. Straight A student, varsity everything, first to enlist, first to be handed opportunities I didn't even know existed. He was loud where I was quiet, charming where I was precise, and that made all the difference. When I was 16, I told my father I wanted to join the army. He didn't blink, just said, "What for?" I told him I wanted to work in intelligence, language, analysis, field strategy. He said, "That's admin work." I corrected him, said it was tactical support. He shrugged. "Still paperwork." Matthew, meanwhile, had already been accepted into the academy. I remember the day the letter came. Mom cried. Dad poured him a scotch. They toasted to boots on the ground. When I shipped off to basic a year later, no one even came to see me off. I took a cab. The first few years of my career were quiet, deliberate. I didn't make noise. I didn't send postcards. I just worked. At one point, I made captain and called home. Dad picked up. "Captain now?" he said. "Yeah." "Good. Keep going." That was it. That was the whole celebration. And I did keep going. Language rotations, counterintelligence postings. I learned to find patterns in chaos. But no matter how far I rose, no matter how many hours I logged in war rooms and black sites, when I came home for holidays, I was still just the daughter who helped with the dishes. Matthew, meanwhile, wore his uniform to Thanksgiving, told loud stories about deployment, about raids and jump training. He once called me the family analyst. I don't even think he meant it as an insult. He just didn't know better. Because I didn't correct him. Because I thought staying silent was easier than explaining the work to people who didn't want to understand it. But silence, I've learned, has a cost. People don't just misunderstand you. They replace you. They write a version of you in their heads that fits their narrative better, and they hand that version to everyone else until it's the only one anyone knows. So yeah, I wore the uniform. But I wasn't in the photo albums. I was the shadow at the edge of every family function. Not dishonored, just unseen. It didn't bother me for a long time. Or maybe it did. But I buried it. Buried it under mission briefs and redacted memos and sleepless nights waiting on intercepted chatter to turn into action. But now, as I walk past the ceremony posters and see Matthew's name right below Dad's in the family honors section, I realize something. They didn't just overlook me. They needed me to stay small so they could stay central. Even my absence had a purpose in their story. But not today. Today, I am not the daughter. I am not the quiet one. And whether they like it or not, I'm not here to sit in the back. Matthew's photo is on the front table. Oversized print. framed in dark oak, next to one of Dad taken in Iraq, the two of them shoulder to shoulder like a recruiting ad. The caption underneath reads, "Continuing the Hart Legacy, Lieutenant Kohler Matthew Rowan, 82nd Airborne." No mention of me, no trace that the Hart family had another officer, let alone one with stars on her shoulders. But that's the pattern, isn't it? Matthew gets the headlines, the applause-worthy stories. He's the boots-on-the-ground Hart, the one who saw combat, the one Dad says earned his stripes the hard way. The hard way. That phrase always made me laugh. Matthew once cried after a week of SEER school. I went through 2 months of shadow surveillance in Yemen, sleeping in market stalls and sending intel back through hand-scribbled courier notes without backup. But Matthew? He made rank by 30, married a perfectly curated spouse named Alyssa, who posts about military family values, and now teaches junior officers how to write operation reports I used to redact. He looks like a leader. I look like a question. And that's the difference. In our family, image wins. At every ceremony, Matthew's stories get center stage. The time he jumped into a combat zone, the time he neutralized a roadside threat, the time he led from the front. No one ever asked who identified that roadside threat. No one asked who found the chatter, who triangulated the signal, who sent the kill chain analysis that got the drone in the air in time. Spoiler alert, that was me. But those wins aren't photogenic. They come in folders, not flags. I remember one Christmas dinner when a family friend asked what I did. Matthew jumped in before I could speak. "She works in military policy," he said, chewing. "She's the smart one." Then he winked like it was a compliment. I smiled because correcting him felt exhausting. Later that night, I cried in the guest bathroom, quietly, with the faucet running. But that was years ago. Now, I stand in the hallway of this grand auditorium, listening to Matthew's voice echo off the marble tiles as he laughs with a group of old friends. He hasn't seen me yet. Or maybe he has. And is pretending not to. Which would be fitting. Matthew always knew how to hold court. He'd make a great senator someday. Or a general. The kind that gives speeches and signs photos and shakes hands at ribbon cuttings. But not today. Today, for the first time, someone's name is going to be called before his. Someone he forgot was still climbing the same ladder. And when that happens, I want to watch his face. Because there's a kind of justice in being underestimated for so long that when your truth finally breaks the surface, it doesn't just shock the room, it rewrites the story they thought they knew. I check my phone. The program's timeline is about to hit the surprise distinguished honor segment. No name listed. Just a note. Special commendation. Presented by General Elias Monroe. I know what that means. And more importantly, I know what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean closure. It doesn't mean validation. And it sure as hell doesn't mean I'll get an apology. But it means this. The world my father built on control, image, and selective memory is about to be interrupted by the daughter he forgot was watching. It started with a whisper. Not the kind you hear in rooms, but the kind that moves between field offices, across secured lines, beneath layers of classified tags and code names. Operation Daggerlight. That was mine. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the kind of thing that made the news or earned shout-outs at galas. But it saved lives. I was stationed in Ankara when the chatter began. Random bursts of movement from a network we thought was dormant. Their patterns didn't match traditional terror cells. They were targeting stability itself, embassies, voting hubs, economic choke points. And they were using silence as their weapon. No claims, no signals, just cracks in infrastructure and fear. I pulled a task force, covert, cross-agency, no jurisdiction. We worked through shredded data, fake names, time zones, and time bombs. The op lasted 16 months. We flagged shell companies in Nairobi, intercepted code word shipments in Cyprus, blew the lid off a Russian crypto laundering ring that no one even knew existed. We prevented 7 attacks, 4 of which had the potential to trigger international retaliation, but no one heard about any of it. Because that's how it works. Real victories don't have victory parades. They have sealed files, nameless briefings, and quiet exfil nights. My name never made it into the reports. Not officially. They used the task force designation, Kestrel 6. Even the internal commendation used my alias. And that was fine. That was the job. Until one mission went sideways. A partner nation went rogue. We had civilians in the blast radius, and I made a call. I bypassed a direct order to delay withdrawal. Rerouted a unit without chain of command approval. My actions prevented the deaths of 42 non-combatants, including an American journalist. But it also exposed the fault lines in the command structure, and that's what they cared about. I was brought in, not arrested, not demoted, just watched. My security clearance was suspended for 11 weeks. I was told I broke protocol, that I acted emotionally. A review board comprised entirely of men who hadn't been near a field op in 2 decades called me reckless. Dad didn't even call. Mom sent me an email. Maybe it's time you came home. We can figure out something more stable for you. Stable. Like I was a broken fence post. I didn't reply. Didn't explain. Didn't justify. I just waited. Because I knew what they didn't. Daggerlight was airtight. And eventually, truth finds its exit wound. 6 months later, an Allied general went public. The operation was declassified, partially. Enough to recognize its impact, enough to trace the decisions that saved lives. My decision. The Medal of Valor was recommended not just for my leadership, but for my disobedience, because sometimes doing the right thing means standing alone, even when the silence burns hotter than betrayal. And now, here I am, on the day of my father's farewell, carrying a story that never fit in his version of legacy. But today, that story's going to be told, even if it has to interrupt his. There's a strange ache that settles in your chest when you've been accused of betraying the very thing you swore to protect. They didn't court-martial me, but they wanted to. They wanted to make an example out of me, but there was too much ambiguity in the paperwork. Too many holes where my decisions were right, just not approved. So instead, they shamed me quietly. They pulled me from tasking, stripped me of access, reassigned me to a dead-end advisory post in a windowless office in Arlington, with nothing but dated threat assessments and lukewarm vending machine coffee. Dad never once asked what happened. He didn't need to. In his mind, the moment I bypassed command, even to save lives, I was a risk, an embarrassment, not a soldier. He never said it. But you don't need words when silence can break bone. The rest of the family fell in line. Matthew stopped texting. Mom sent me care packages like I was sick, not sidelined. Little notes with scripture verses and coupons for spa treatments. As if lavender oil could scrub away the feeling of being exiled for doing the right thing. I spent 9 months in that office. No mission briefs, no midnight alerts. Just spreadsheets and security memos and a desk that sat too close to the HVAC unit. I started running at night, not for fitness, for movement. So I wouldn't calcify. There's this memory I keep returning to, a dinner 3 years ago. I was on a 48-hour leave, fresh off an assignment I couldn't talk about. We were at Dad's house. Long oak table, polished silver. My seat still had no name card. Matthew was talking about his unit's rotation through Estonia, puffing his chest about NATO coordination. At one point, Mom said, "Maybe Camille can help you organize your notes. She's good with detail." Matthew grinned and said, "Yeah, she's like a walking filing cabinet." Dad laughed. I didn't. But I smiled. Because what else was I supposed to do? Tell them I'd just finished helping neutralize a cell that had planted surveillance gear inside an allied foreign minister's embassy walls? You can't win arguments with ghosts, especially the ones who wear your last name, but you can outlast them. And now, as I sit backstage, medal in hand, name printed clean on the certificate, I realize I didn't get here because of them. I got here despite them. And while they whispered traitor, the world eventually whispered back hero. The irony? The very action that nearly ended my career is what they're pinning a medal to my chest for today. That's how institutions work. They punish you for coloring outside the lines. Until history proves your color was the only thing that made sense. They told me I broke faith. But what I broke was their illusion that obedience and integrity are always the same thing. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not bitter. I'm just clear. Like ice. Like steel. And when the announcer calls my name before my father's, they'll all realize I was never the one who broke the family. I was the one who survived it. I hear the words before I feel them. Brigadier General Camille Rowan. There's a rustle through the audience. Chairs shifting, necks craning, confusion tightening like a coil in the room. Up front, Matthew turns slightly in his seat. Mom goes stiff. Dad doesn't move. And me? I rise. Not fast, not flashy, just deliberate. One step, then another. Metal box in hand, dress blues pressed so sharp they could slice through glass. The walk down the aisle is slower than I expect. Not because I hesitate, but because I want them to see it. Really see it. The weight of my bars. The sheen of ribbons they've never asked about. The scar just barely visible under my collar. Souvenir from a detainment camp extraction they'll never read about. The audience is still clapping, but it's not polite applause. It's startled, curious, tense, like the room is trying to decide how it missed the plot twist. I step onto the stage and shake General Elias's hand. He says nothing, just looks me dead in the eye and nods. That nod says everything. I know what you did. You did it right. You did it alone. And now, they know too. He turns to the mic. His voice is low, deliberate. For extraordinary leadership and moral courage during Operation Daggerlight, Brigadier General Camille Rowan is awarded the Medal of Valor for decisive actions that prevented civilian casualties and protected Allied personnel in hostile territory. I don't hear the rest. I mean, I do. But it's like hearing your own name spoken underwater. Surreal. Warped by the weight of being seen after years of erasure. Somewhere in the middle of the speech, I scan the front row. Mom looks pale, like she's just realized all those desk job years weren't so desk-bound after all. Matthew's jaw is tight, his hand clenched on his knee, the kind of grip men use when they realize their default spotlight has been momentarily dimmed. And Dad is just staring, not blinking, not breathing, not moving. Until the announcer says, awarded prior to General Richard Rowan's retirement commendation, in recognition of her individual contribution to national security operations during her father's active service period. That's when I see it. The shift. The snap. Not in the audience. In him. He's still staring at me, but now his hand moves. Slowly, deliberately, to his temple. And then, he salutes. I almost don't believe it. Not because it's not real, but because I never imagined he would. Not in front of everyone, not with Matthew watching, but he does. And he holds it. For 1 second, 2, 3. Long enough that everyone sees it. Long enough that everyone knows. He knows. The applause swells again, but I don't hear it. I return the salute, sharp and clean. Not for show, not for revenge, but for closure. Then I turn away. Because if I stayed even a second longer, I might cry. And today is not for tears. It's for truth. And finally, truth is louder than the silence ever was. The ceremony continues without me. I step down from the stage and return to my seat near the back, slipping into the same row I started in. But something has changed. The air feels different now. People glance at me, not out of confusion, but curiosity. Deference, even. A few nod. One colonel offers a quiet, measured, "Ma'am." Another officer across the aisle rises subtly to stand at attention as I pass. I don't acknowledge it. Not out of arrogance, but because I'm still coming down from the moment I never thought would come. The moment my father saluted me. He didn't smile. He didn't clap. But he saluted. In his world, that meant everything. I settle into my seat just as they call his name for his commendation. There's a swell of reverent applause, rehearsed patriotism, flags waving, slideshow playing. A montage of dusty deployment photos, black and white headshots from early training years, footage of Dad at the Pentagon giving some long-forgotten briefing. It's the kind of tribute you give a man whose story was already carved into granite. But now, a crack runs through that stone, and I put it there. Not to destroy him, but to finally be seen by him. Shaw, the same general who introduced me, returns to the podium. She gives the official remarks, polished and respectful. She talks about legacy, about pillars of strength, about family, and then she does something unexpected. General Hart's legacy is not only in the battles he led, but in the quiet courage of those who served in the shadows beside him. In that spirit, today's ceremony has honored not just a retiring legend, but a rising one as well. My mother looks like she's holding her breath. General Camille Rowan's service represents the kind of leadership we don't always see, but owe everything to. Let today serve as a reminder. Legacy isn't only what you leave behind. Sometimes it's what rises beside you, quietly, until it can no longer be ignored. Matthew shifts in his chair. His wife whispers something to him, but he doesn't respond. I watch my father. He doesn't look up at Shaw. He looks sideways, at me. We lock eyes. And for once, I don't feel invisible. I feel inevitable. I don't smile. Neither does he. But something passes between us. A truce, maybe. Or the first stone of a bridge we'll spend the rest of our lives trying to build. After the ceremony ends, people begin filtering out. There's chatter, handshakes, murmurs of surprise. A few approach me, officers, former colleagues, even a young female cadet who looks like she wants to say something but doesn't. I offer a quiet nod. She returns it. That's enough. I wait for the crowd to thin. I don't want a scene. I don't want confetti or congratulations. I just want a moment. That's when I feel a presence beside me. Heavy steps, familiar silence. I don't turn. Camille, Dad says. My name in his voice still sounds foreign, but less so now. He stands just behind me, not quite shoulder to shoulder. I didn't know, he says. That's the point, I answer. You never wanted to. He doesn't argue, doesn't deflect. He just stands there, hands behind his back, the way soldiers do when they're holding something heavier than a weapon. I'm proud of you. The words drop like stones, heavy, honest, late, but not empty. I nod. No smile, but my throat tightens anyway. I was wrong, he adds, about a lot. I wait. Not to rub it in, not to gloat, just to let it settle, because truth takes time to find its shape in the room. I'm not asking for anything, he says quietly. Not forgiveness, not anything fixed. I just needed to say it. I finally look at him. Okay, I say, because it's the only thing that fits. We don't hug. We're not that kind of family, but we do something better. We see each other. Really, finally, clearly. And that's the kind of honor you don't put in a metal case. You carry it. Even when no one's looking. The reception is held in the banquet hall, one of those places with polished wooden floors and ceilings just low enough to muffle the buzz of conversations into a low, anxious hum. I step in out of obligation, not desire. I've done my part. My name's been spoken. My medal's been pinned. The silence has cracked. That should be enough. But something pulls me to stay just a little longer. The room is filled with people who've known my father for decades. Old brass and new faces, civilian contractors, aides, and a few too many well-meaning strangers trying to string together compliments that land somewhere between awkward and curious. I stay near the perimeter, a shadow, by habit, but no longer unseen. Matthew approaches eventually. Alone. No wife, no fanfare. He's not smiling, but he's not scowling either. He scratches the back of his neck and says, "I didn't know." I almost laugh. That makes 3 of them. "Yeah, you didn't ask." He nods. "I figured you were just busy, doing paperwork or something." He says it like he knows how stupid that sounds now. "I was busy," I say. "Just not the way you assumed." He looks down at his boots. "That guy in the video, Reyes, you saved him?" I nod once. "And you?" He looks up fast. "That training op in Jordan? 6 years ago? I rerouted your jump team. You would have walked into a mobile missile unit if we hadn't flagged the rerouted telemetry. We didn't have enough time for a full extraction, so I bought you time instead." He stares at me, jaw slack. "I was the voice on the other end of the scrambled order that made your CO change course." His throat works around a swallow. "Jesus, Camille." "Yeah." He breathes out like someone just told him the ghost in his closet has a name, and it's mine. "I'm sorry," he says. It's quiet, almost like it hurts to admit. Not just for that, for everything, for letting them erase you, for not pushing back when they made you small. I study his face. It's not regretful, it's raw. "It wasn't just them," I say. "It was all of you, the whole damn house. Every holiday where I was asked to clear the plates while you got to tell war stories. Every photo I wasn't in. Every time Mom said, 'She's still doing her thing,' like I was off at a painting retreat instead of counterintelligence." "I know," he sighs. "I bought into it, because it was easier to play the role they gave me than to ask who you really were. And now?" He doesn't hesitate. "Now I'm listening." And for the first time, I believe him. We don't hug either, but we shake hands. His grip is tight, respectful. Not because I'm his sister, but because I'm a general. Mom finds me near the exit. She's wringing her hands, a motion I've come to recognize as her version of panic. "I would have dressed differently," she says with a half laugh, "if I'd known." "You didn't want to know," I reply gently. She nods. "I didn't understand what you did. I didn't expect you to, but I should have asked." Her voice cracks slightly, just enough to make me pause. "I told myself you preferred distance, that you liked your space, that you didn't need what Matthew did." "I didn't need it," I say, "but it would have been nice to be invited anyway." She nods, pressing a napkin to her eyes like she's dabbing away decades. Then she pulls something from her purse, a small box. "We were going to give this to your father tonight," she says, "but I want you to have it." I open it slowly. Inside, a compass. Old, scuffed, military issued. It's the one he carried. I recognize it from old photos. She smiles. "He asked me to give it to you. Said it's time someone else carried the direction." I blink hard. Not because I need to cry, but because I didn't expect anything more. And sometimes the smallest gestures carry the most weight. I close the box and nod. "Thank you," I whisper. The night winds down. The chatter fades. The The music switches to soft strings no one really hears. I don't stay for dessert. I don't need to. On my way out, Dad stops me one last time. No fanfare, no speech. Just, "You're the best part of the legacy I never saw coming." I nod. That's enough. 6 months later, I'm back in DC, still serving, still quiet, still working in places the light never touches. But something's different. My name's on the door now. My calls get returned faster. Younger officers ask about my field rotations with something like awe, and sometimes, only sometimes, I see someone hesitate before calling me ma'am, like they've heard of me before and can't quite remember where. That's fine. They don't need to remember everything. Just enough. At home, I keep the compass in a drawer near the front door, not because I need to use it, but because it reminds me I didn't follow the family path. I made my own. Through fog, through betrayal, through silence. And it led me right here. If this story reminded you of your own quiet fight, of the times you were written out and came back louder than anyone expected, go ahead and subscribe, because sometimes the stories that matter most are the ones no one wanted to hear, until you stood on a stage and made them listen. This was my story, and I'm finally done whispering it.